Okay, we're going to cover Shintoism in the next lecture, and this is a very old and rich tradition in Japanese culture that is still around today in Japan. And it also is very eclectic because it combines many religious aspects from not only Japanese culture but other Asian cultures and religions around Japan. Okay, so what is Shinto? Shinto is the national religion of Japan. So it's a state religion, and it's necessarily defined in terms of beliefs or doctrines. It's more about religious practices and rituals. Also indicates the Japanese pattern of social behavior, so how one conducts oneself, what proper steps one goes through in a social situation, whether that be sitting down for a meal or sitting down for a wrestling match. There's certain steps that must be followed to follow the pattern in the rituals of the Shinto. It's very eclectic, like I said. It has elements of folklore, magic, ancestral spirits, ritualism, and of course nationalism. Now the term Shinto actually did not arise until the 6th century of the Common Era. It's taken from Shin and Tao, so the way or Tao of the gods or spirits Shin, so it's a Chinese word. It's also defined as Kami no Michi, which means the way of the gods or spirits, of the kamis. And we're going to see what they are in just a moment. Okay, so a kami is basically anything from the spirit world. So it can refer to the gods of heaven and earth, but also humans, nature. Inanimate objects can be kamis or have kamis. The whole world is pregnant with the spiritual realm. And there's really not a sharp divide between them. They can flow from one side to the other. If you've watched a lot of any Asian animation, especially Japanese animation, the spirit world and the physical world, those two realities are often kind of blurred a lot of times, and there's not this tension going back and forth between the two. A kami is not an absolute being in relation to the world, so that means that even plants and rocks can be kamis, ancestors can be kamis, everything basically can be kamis, and all the ceremonies and festivals in Shinto and Japanese culture are kind of centered around the kami itself for that particular action or that particular ritual, or for that particular family. Maybe they're honoring their ancestors as kamis. Okay, this idea of purity is really important in Shintoism. A lot of times in Japanese culture, Shinto priests will do a lot of the funerals. The Buddhists will do the weddings. So if you ever go to a Shinto temple, you'll often see a bathing area to wash yourself, clean yourself before you go into the temple to make sure that you're clean. There's little shakers there where you can scare away the evil spirits that might be attached to you. Excuse me. In Shintoism, there's the principle of Han. Han is the awareness of the productive goodness of nature. So there's the idea of fertility in nature is really important in Shinto belief. It also describes the obligation that people have to their benefactors, to their ancestors, that you have this certain sense of obligation to give of yourself no matter what, and to do something that would break that obligation, be shameful in the culture. So this kind of gets to the idea of commitment and loyalty of being really central to Japanese culture, and so much so that if you cause shame on the family, then you should take your own life. and we'll look at that in just a second. So you have this other idea of sasaichi, which is religious and political dimensions are one. Shintoism doesn't make the divide, just as they don't make the divide between the spirit world and the physical world, they don't make the divide between the religious dimension of life and the political dimension of life. Shintoism does have a nationalistic ethos, so it's very nationalistic. Even the deities in ancient Shinto belief were born on the Japanese islands. The Japanese islands were placed on the earth for the gods to be born there. So very nationalistic. And we see this in World War II with a lot of the suicide bombers, the kamikaze pilots who were willing to sacrifice themselves for the state without any reservation. And so fulfilling your roles and duties and loyalties in society is more important than yourself. Even if it is not the truth, maybe you're doing something that's not right or the truth, but if it means breaking that social obligation you might have, then you're supposed to do the wrong thing, even if your conscience goes against it. Okay. So the afterlife. Even though the Buddhists do a lot of the funeral services, the Shinto priests will do a lot of the weddings. So there is an afterlife. It's a gloomy underground kind of place, kind of like the Sumerian and Babylonian underworlds that we looked at earlier on in the course. So after death, a family or a child, if they've died, they become a family spirit or kami. And the family should keep up the household rituals honoring the kamis so that they do not get back at them or cause havoc in the home. There's also this principle of harai, which is the rite of ritual purification. They do this in the family. You might do some kind of oblation to a family shrine in the house, or one way of pouring water for ritual cleansing or purification ceremony, also in the house. Misogi Harai is a water purification ritual. There's also kind of amulets, protective items, superstitious type of actions to protect yourself from evil spirits. And then there's what I mentioned earlier, the idea of ritual suicide, harikiri, and that's if you bring shame upon yourself, then you're supposed to take your own life. Same thing in battle and war, you're supposed to kill yourself instead of being captured, because that would be shameful to be captured. Shintoism doesn't have any official scriptures, doctrines, or ethics. So there's chronicles of the ancient Shinto masters, and then also the chronicles of the history of Japan, our religious history of Japan. And you can read these actually online at sacredtext.com/shi. Okay, there's a creation story in Japan, and rooted in Shintoism, and this is what I was talking about earlier. So in the beginning, and we see this in African religions as well, some of the traditions in African, also Near Eastern religions have this idea of heaven and earth originally being united together as one life principle or mass. And some reed shoots burst out from this and became a god, a kami. And then the primal couple, Izanagi and Izanami, created the Japanese islands. And then Izanagi's daughter is Amaterasu. You might see a lot of Amaterasu temples around the country in Japan today. She was the sun goddess. And Aningi was Amaterasu's grandson, and he was the first emperor of Japan. And then also other kamis found in the ruling Japanese families. So each clan in ancient Japan could trace back their origin to the primal couple who were also divine. And then each clan has their own rituals and practices based upon their ancestral kamis. Okay, in the 3rd century, there was a group, the Yamato clan, and they kind of imposed this idea in the beliefs and teachings of Kami Amaterasu, um, the sun gods of Amaterasu, on the other clans. And so you will see actually um, Amaterasu temples in lots of places and not just in a particular clan's territory. And what they did was they put the local chieftains as presiding over the rituals and giving them divine origin. Um, in this way, they kind of solidified their power in the culture and in society. And then they emphasized the superiority of the Japanese race by tracing their origins to these original gods that came out at creation. The Japanese islands were especially created for the grandson of Amaterasu. So most of their religious actions are ceremonial purifications, agricultural rituals, stages of life, ceremonies, and this kind of thing. Okay, so Shintoism also has a lot of borrowing from other religions. So Shinto is based upon Chinese script. The idea of the cult of ancestor worship kind of came over from folk Chinese religion. Also, Taoist philosophical concepts are found in Shintoism. Confucianism, the idea of this nationalistic ethos, and pragmatism, also emphasizing educational institutions, was borrowing from Confucianism. So this primal idea of Amaterasu, the divine origin of the emperor, became a national deity. And then also later on in the Common Era, the 6th century Buddhism kind of migrated to Japan and really had an impact encouraging arts and literature and the sciences. And then when this happened, there was that division of labor that I mentioned before. The Shintos do marriage and the Buddhists do funerals. And then, of course, Christianity also impacted Japan when it came over in the 16th century. Okay, state Shinto, a lot of the nationalism really took place in the 1800s as far as really solidifying a state militaristic idea or ethos for the country. So Emperor Meiji was one who really emphasized state Shinto, and the government only recognized Buddhist, Christians, and Shinto, though they were severely limited and often oppressed. They tried to wipe out other religions such as Christianity and Buddhism, but it was so ingrained by this time in the culture that they weren't able to get it all ridden out of the culture itself. Okay, and shrine Shinto, building shrines in many different places around the country. This is why there are so many temples to Amaterasu, because they were built and dedicated during this time period. Okay, there are many different sects of Shinto. There's pure Shinto, Confucian Shinto, mountain Shinto, purification Shinto, redemptive Shinto that has some Christian elements. And this is because the religion is very eclectic and doesn't have necessarily a centralized place of authority for the religion. So some of the borrowings from other cultures and religions kind of found their way into Shinto practices and rituals and beliefs as well. So the status of women, it's changed from what it was a very long time ago. Originally, we found evidence that Japan was matriarchal in nature early on in BCE. However, the Confucian ethics that came over from China kind of reversed this into a patriarchal society, and it's heavily patriarchal today. Even amongst the worldview of many Japanese women today, feminism has never really taken root in Japan because of the really firmly ingrained patriarchal ideology in Japanese culture. So the ideal Japanese family consists of 3 generations under one roof. A lot of ancient and Eastern cultures, this is a value to have multiple generations living together. In the West, we've kind of moved away from this, sometimes to our own detriment, I think, but something that we can really learn from these Eastern religions of seeing the importance of familial ties and maintaining the status of the family. So divorce in these cultures is very low compared to Western cultures, Japan in particular. It's still a very conservative culture as well, very respectful, really wants to not offend people, to do the right thing in a social situation. Okay. And even though women have a poor status from a Western perspective, from them, they actually place a lot of honor in being a woman and being a housewife. So even the women, in some of the literature, they criticize Western women for their, um, for their lewdness in dress sometimes, but also for their disrespect for the goodness of the role of being a mother and a wife. They see a lot of feminism as trying to denigrate those things instead of honoring them. So it's a different way of looking at the roles of men and women in these different cultures. However, women did win the right to vote in Japan in 1941, and in 1979 there was equal rights offered to women in the culture. So kind of late. Abortion is allowed, but not really. It really kind of started off from the practice of eugenics, or trying to weed out the bad genes and only emphasize the social Darwinism of sorts, emphasize the good genes. This was done a lot around the world during this time period, the middle of the 20th century and early in the 20th century, of trying to weed out and test, controlled breeding of humans and test subjects to get rid of what they would see as bad elements of human nature. Okay, there's several rites of passage in the culture, as with many cultures. There are the 3rd, 5th, and 7th years of life that accompany Shinto ceremonies. There's also a really popular festival, the Girls' Festival, where they have a bunch of dolls. Then they have the Boys' Festival. Then they have the Festival of the Dead, and this is where the souls of your dead relatives and loved ones return to the homes to be entertained by the families and fed at the home shrine. So they'll lay out a lavish feast for their ancestors and celebrate the meal together. And then, of course, New Year's festivals are very important in the Japanese and Shinto traditions. And that concludes our lecture on Shintoism.